Okay, good morning. This is chapter 4 and chapter 5 from Don. Douglas, you ready? All right, let's do it. During the hour that followed, nobody said a word. They were all thinking of David Ben Moshe. David was not alone in his death cell. All his friends were with him, all except me. I did not think of David except when they pronounced his name. When they were silent, my thoughts went out to someone else, to a man I did not know yet, any more than I knew David, but whom I was fated to know. My David Ben Moshe had the name and face of an Englishman, Captain John Dawson. We sat around the table and Alana served us some steaming tea. For some time we sipped it without speaking. We looked into the golden liquid of our cups as if we were searching in it for the next step of our after our silence and the meaning of the events which had brought it about. Then, in order to kill time, we spoke of our memories, of such of them that centered on death. Death saved my life, Joab began. He had a young, innocent, tormented face, dark, confused eyes, and hair as white as that of an old man. He wore a perpetually sleepy expression and yawned from one end of the day to the other. A neighbor who was against us because of his pacifist convictions reported me to the police, he went on. I took shelter in an insane asylum whose superintendent was an old school friend, and I stayed there for 2 weeks until the police found my traces. Is he here? They asked the superintendent. Yes, he admitted. He is here. He is a very sick man. What's the matter with him? They asked. He imagines he's dead, the superintendent told them, but they insisted on seeing me. I was brought to the superintendent's office where the two police officials assigned to the anti-terrorist campaign were waiting. They spoke to me, but I did not answer. They asked me questions, but I pretended not to hear. Even so, they were not convinced that I was crazy. Overriding the superintendent's protest, they took me away and submitted me to 48 hours of interrogation. I played dead and played it successfully. I refused to eat or drink. When they slapped my hands and face, I did not react. Dead men feel no pain, and so they do not cry. After 48 hours, I was taken back to the asylum. As I listened to Joab, various thoughts floated to the surface of my mind. I remembered hearing some of my comrades refer to Joab as the madman. Funny, isn't it? He said. Death actually saved my life. He kept silence for several minutes as if to pay homage to death for saving his life and giving the name of madman to a fellow with an innocent, tormented face. Several days later, when I left the asylum, I saw that my hair had turned white, Joab concluded. That's one of Death's little jokes, I put in. Death loves to change the color of people's hair. Death has no hair. It only has eyes. God, on the other hand, has no eyes at all. God save me from death, said Gideon. We all called Gideon the saint, first because he was a saint, and second because he looked like one. He was a husky, inarticulate fellow, some 20 years old, who took pains to make himself inconspicuous and was always mumbling prayers. He wore a beard and side curls and went nowhere without a prayer book in his pocket. His father was a rabbi, and when he learned that his son was meant to become a terrorist, he gave him his blessing. There are times, his father said, when words and prayers are not enough. The God of grace is also the God of war, and war is not a matter of mere words. God saved me from death, Gideon repeated. His eyes saved me. I too was arrested and tortured. They pulled at my beard, lit matches under my fingernails, and spat in my face, all in order to make me confess that I had taken part in an attempt against the life of the High Commissioner. But in spite of the pain, I did not talk. More than once I was tempted to cry out, but I kept quiet because I felt that God's eyes were upon me. God is looking at me, I said to myself, and I must not disappoint him. My torturers never stopped shouting, but I kept my thoughts on God and on his eyes, which are drawn to human pain. For lack of evidence, they finally had to set me free. If I had admitted my guilt, I should be dead. And then I put in, God would have closed his eyes. Alana refilled our cups. What about you, Alana? What saved your life? A cold in the head, she replied. I burst out laughing, but no one joined in. My laugh was raucous and artificial. A cold in the head? I repeated. Yes, said Alana quite seriously. The English have no description of me. They only know my voice. One day, they hauled in a whole group of women, myself among them. At the police station, a sound engineer compared each one of our voices to that of the mysterious announcer of the Voice of Freedom. Thanks to the fact that I had a heavy cold, I was quickly eliminated, and 4 other women were detained for further questioning. Once more, I was tempted to laugh, but the others were glum and silent. A cold, I thought to myself, and in this case it turned out to have a more practical use than either faith or courage. Next, we all looked at Gad, who was almost crushing his teacup between his fingers. I owe my life to three Englishmen, he said, with his head almost on his right shoulder and his eyes fixed upon the cup. He seemed to be addressing the rapidly cooling tea. It was very early in the game, he went on. For reasons that no longer matter, the old man had ordered 3 hostages taken. They were all sergeants, and I was assigned to kill one of them, anyone, and that choice was up to me. I was young then, about the age of Alicia, and suffered great mental agony from having this unwanted role thrust upon me. I was unwilling to play the executioner, but not the judge. Unfortunately, during the night, I lost contact with the old man and could not explain my reluctance. The sentence had to be carried out at dawn, and how was I to choose the victim? Finally, I had an idea. I went down to the cellar and told the 3 sergeants that the choice was up to them. If I don't make it, I said, then all 3 of you will be shot. They decided to draw lots, and when dawn came, I put a bullet in the unlucky fellow's neck. Involuntarily, I looked at Gad's hands and face, the familiar hands and face of my friend, who had put a bullet in the neck of a fellow human being, and now talked coldly, almost indifferently about it. Was the sergeant's face gazing up at him from his golden cup of cool tea? What if the sergeants had refused to settle it among themselves, I asked. What then? Gad squeezed the cup harder than ever, almost as if he were trying to break it. I think I would have killed myself instead, he said in a flat voice, and after a moment of heavy silence, he added, I tell you, I was young and very weak. All eyes turned toward me, in expectation of my story. I gulped down a mouthful of bitter tea and wiped the perspiration off my forehead. I owe my life to a laugh, I said. It was during one winter at Buchenwald. We were clothed in rags, and hundreds of people died of cold every day. In the morning, we had to leave our barracks and wait outside in the snow for as long as 2 hours until they had been cleaned. One day I felt so sick that I was sure that exposure would kill me, so I stayed behind, in hiding. Quite naturally, I was discovered, and the cleaning squad dragged me before one of the many assistant barracks leaders. Without stopping to question me, he caught hold of my throat and said dispassionately, I'm going to choke you. His powerful hands closed in on my throat, and in my enfeebled condition, I did not even try to put up a fight. Very well, I said to myself, it's all over. I felt the blood gather in my head, and my head swell to several times its normal size, so that it must have looked like a caricature, a miserable clown. I was sure, from one minute to the next, that it would burst into 1,000 shreds like a child's toy balloon. At this moment, the assistant leader took a good look at me and found the sight so comical that he released his grip and burst out laughing. He laughed so long that he forgot his intention to kill, and that's how I got out of it unharmed. It's funny, isn't it, that I should owe my life to an assassin's sense of humor. I expected my listeners to scrutinize my head to see if it had really returned to its normal size, but they did nothing of the sort. They continued to stare into their stone-cold tea. In the next few minutes, nobody opened his mouth. We had no more desire to call up the past or to listen to our fellows tell their troubled life stories. We sat in restless silence around the table. Every one of us, I'm sure, was asking himself what he really owed his life. Gideon was the first to speak. We ought to take the Englishman something to eat, he said. Yes, I said to myself, Gideon is sad too. He's thinking of John Dawson. He must be. It's inevitable. I don't imagine he's hungry, I said aloud. You can't expect a man condemned to die to have an appetite. And to myself I added, or a condemned man to kill either. There must have been a strange tone in my voice, for the others raised their heads, and I felt the puzzled quality of their penetrating stares. No, I said stubbornly, a man condemned to die can't be hungry. They did not stir, but sat petrified as the seconds dragged interminably by. The condemned man's traditional last meal is a joke, I said loudly, a joke in the worst possible taste, an insult to the corpse that he is about to be. What does a man care if he dies with an empty stomach? The expression of astonishment lingered in Gad's eyes, but Alana looked at me with a compassion, and Gideon with friendliness. Joab did not even look at me at all.